Well, Avatar: The Way of Water is finally here. Yay. And after waiting 13 years since the first film, I wouldn't say the anticipation for this thing was all that high. The enthusiasm for Part 1 cooled down a lot after moviegoers got some distance from it, and once the novelty of the eye-popping visuals cooled off a little bit, it became increasingly hard to ignore things like the derivative story, flat characters, ham-fisted social commentary, and since James Cameron gave people over a decade to pick that movie apart while he was taking his sweet time making this one, not to mention prepping 3 more after that because God forbid anyone not be excited for those, recapturing that lightning in a bottle was gonna be a little trickier this time around. But it's not like JC hasn't pulled that particular rabbit out of a hat before, so did he take this to heart with The Way of Water? Did he rely less heavily on the VFX, up his game in the storytelling department, and write some more nuanced characters this time? Oh boy, there's a lot to unpack with this one. Even my notes for this video were a couple pages long, so I need to structure this video a little differently from how I normally do movie reviews, because I think there's a real possibility to be so dazzled by the admittedly incredible aesthetics of this film and the absolute technical wizardry on display here that you end up giving it a pass on all the stuff that is less impressive. That's the trick I fell for with the first movie, so I want to be very careful how I approach this one. There are 4 different aspects of The Way of Water that I need to cover one at a time to really get a handle on this thing. The visuals, the world building, the characters, and the story. Let's do this. Now, visually speaking, just visually, you have never seen anything like this movie. Calling it stunning isn't even the tip of the iceberg. If Cameron took CG and motion capture a quantum leap forward with the first Avatar, then he just did it again. Everything looks more lush, more detailed. Cameron had been coming off pretty egotistical with some of the comments he made recently about how his motion capture was gonna blow Thanos out of the water, but holy shit, give the man his kudos because he wasn't lying. The Na'vi move so fluidly and their faces are so expressive and convey emotion so well, you might just forget that you're watching a motion capture performance sometimes. Just shine up the best VFX Oscar right now, because no one is even coming close to this. Cameron may have a big ego, but he backed up the smack talk and then some. But as amazing as the motion capture stuff is, the ocean is even more impressive. I still don't get what it is about the ocean that Cameron is so enraptured by, but now I see why he was so eager to show it off in the trailers rather than tell us, you know, what the story was. My God. He designed an entire underwater ecosystem. And yeah, it's the same type of thing he did in the first movie, but this makes even that look like kid stuff. I thought the underwater scenes in Wakanda Forever looked good, but this is leagues better than that. They did beat Cameron to the punch with the underwater blue people though, and that has to stick in his craw a little bit. I don't know if I have the words to properly describe how gorgeous these underwater scenes look. First of all, it looks like they're really underwater, because they actually shot underwater. Don't underestimate what a difference that makes. And everything from the fish to the plant life to even simple coral reefs looks so colorful and so vibrant and so photorealistic, it almost makes you want to weep at how beautiful it all is. Even the way the Na'vi interact with the fish and how they move through the water together, they must have been shooting with practical models enhanced with CG, because I don't know if totally CG creations could look this good. Now, Cameron definitely spends a long fucking time on characters just swimming around, looking at the scenery, learning about the marine life, making googly eyes at all the pretty fish and whatnot, and yeah, the story does start dragging because of this, especially in the third act, but goddamn, it's really hard to begrudge him that when he can make eye candy this delicious. Really hard. Not impossible. As breathtaking as it is to look at, the I love the ocean scenes just go on and on and on, and sure, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, but there was just so much of it, and the action scenes were the same way. Cameron can stage action sequences like few directors can, but they go for so damn long, and he takes so much time setting the stage for them that it really starts to come off as self-indulgent after a while. I'm sorry, but the impression I ended up with was that Cameron was so impressed with his own handiwork that he just could not bear to part with a single frame of this 3 hour and 12 minute behemoth. And that's a little hard to fathom because I swear you could probably shave 45 minutes off this movie without losing anything. No story, no characters, just coverage and scenery porn. But let's not kid ourselves, the scenery porn is the biggest selling point these movies have, so that wasn't gonna happen. And as far as the 3D is concerned, I don't have that much to say about it. It's impressive as hell, maybe the best I've ever seen, and it's completely unnecessary. You're not gonna miss anything by just watching the normal version. Save yourself a couple bucks, it'll be fine. This one's hit and miss. Like with everything else in the movie, you can see what Cameron's obsessions are and where his interest lies. He loves the Na'vi and their culture, he loves the ecology of Pandora, the plants, the animals, the planet itself, which may or may not be alive somehow in more ways than one. More on that in a minute. So there's tons and tons of effort put into those things, fleshing out anything that has to do with nature and putting all these interesting little details in how those things work and how the Na'vi interact with the natural world. For example, the Na'vi have different ethnicities. I had never considered this before, but when Jake takes Neytiri and the kids to the sea people, they all look different. And thank God for that, because I was having enough trouble telling these assholes apart as it is. But the sea people are colored differently, they dress differently, they've got fins on their tails and arms to help with swimming, and I wouldn't have thought of that, but it makes total sense. Their culture is all about the water, so they would have evolved differently than the forest people. That's really clever. And there's lots of other stuff like that in there too. Some of it is less clever and more stupid. Sentient talking whales, Cameron? Really? But one thing at a time. But yeah, the Na'vi and their world get a lot of attention. Cameron's much less interested in the humans though, which is basically every single villain in the movie, and the human good guys from the first film who show up in like one scene and then disappear. So the humans exist, their whole motivation for being back on Pandora is mentioned like twice, just enough for you to know it's a thing, but it's obvious Cameron couldn't care less about that part, so once he has his MacGuffin and his plot device, he just moves on and doesn't elaborate. And that becomes a big problem, which is only going to get bigger in the sequels if he keeps doing this, because aside from all the natural world stuff, which obviously got the bulk of Cameron's focus, he introduces some really crazy new concepts that range everywhere from total bullshit to "F you, I'm James Cameron, eat my shit and like it." This was the stuff that needed more attention, because it's flimsy enough on its face, but when some batshit new idea is introduced just barely long enough to explain the plot, and then nothing is done with it after that, you've got a problem. Case in point, and this isn't a spoiler because they already let this cat out of the bag, Quaritch is back. You know, the villain from the first movie, that one-dimensional caricature saved only by Stephen Lang's charisma, who died a pretty ugly death when he got several gigantic f***-off arrows right in the chest. Yeah, he's back, now in an avatar body of his own, and the method by which this happens is so goddamn ridiculous and paper-thin, I couldn't believe they were serious about it. And what's worse, they exposit this shit in one quick scene, and then it's never addressed again. Hi, future me. I'm recording this video to tell you that I copied my brain onto a hard drive. So, in the event that I die, which will totally never happen by the way, you can just be uploaded into a Na'vi avatar body and pick up right where I left off. So when you get down there and start killing blue monkeys, tell them Quaritch sent you. Peace out, homie. That's it? That's all the explanation we get for how Quaritch is back? Cameron, that's a pretty fucking big development to introduce and then discard 2 minutes later. Can you elaborate more, please? You can't? Oh. Alright then. So the TLDR version is that some of the world building is really good and really thoughtful, but then there's other stuff, potentially much more interesting stuff, that feels underdeveloped either because of bad plotting or because Cameron just didn't care about it, because who gives a shit about those boring humans, am I right? Yeah, The Quaritch thing was pretty baffling to me, because here this guy has been reborn in the body of his enemy, the thing he hates the most, the thing that killed him, and they don't even try to explore what that does to him psychologically. He just accepts it, like, damn, that's a bitch. Okay, let's go kill some blue monkeys. They finally had a chance to do something interesting with this character, or do anything with the character, let's be honest, and they just threw it away. How does he feel about not being human anymore? How does he feel about the original Quaritch being dead? We don't know. The movie cares about that for like 90 seconds, maybe. The plot device of him returning comes right the f*** out of nowhere. It's a thing for one scene, maybe two, and then they're just done with it. It's so rushed and half-baked. I would bet money that this was not in the original plan, because so much of Quaritch's subplot really needed to be set up in the first movie, and it wasn't. I'm pretty sure Cameron didn't intend to bring this guy back at first, but maybe he just really liked working with Stephen Lang, so he figured, F it, I'm James Cameron, I can get away with anything. So he hit the retcon button and half-assed this new subplot into existence for him. And they do have other stuff for Quaritch this time, so he gets some actual development, but why the hell his development wasn't about this? I have no fucking clue. The stuff with the Na'vi characters is, I wouldn't say better, but their plots get more time at least. Once again, Cameron has his favorites though. Neytiri doesn't really get a storyline this time, and Jake's plot basically amounts to him just barking orders and trying to keep his family safe from the evil colonizer humans. Clearly the most interesting stuff with Jake happened in the first movie, and now Cameron's moved on to other people. And I'm not sure how good of an idea that was. There are a lot of new Na'vi characters, whose names I couldn't keep track of for the life of me, but most of them don't really do that much. Some of them get involved in the Sully family subplots if they're lucky. The most important ones are Jake and Neytiri's adopted daughter, I could do a whole separate video on all the weird shit with her, and their younger son. Those two actually get their own subplots, but the one with the son isn't all that interesting. He feels like a disappointment to his father, he keeps screwing up, it's nothing you haven't seen before, but it's in an alien setting with lots of pretty alien fish and talking whales and shit, so I guess that's supposed to make up for it somehow. There's also Spider, who is technically a human character, but I don't really count him as one because he grew up on Pandora in a plot that was obviously retconned in there after the first movie, and this is another Quaritch type of case where the character has something really interesting and unique about him that the movie could explore, but it doesn't. He grew up on an alien planet, but he can't even breathe the air. He feels more at home with the Na'vi than his own race, but he's an outsider to them, doesn't look like them, can't do what they do. You'd think this kid would have all kinds of identity issues, but the movie doesn't even care about that. Instead, he gets this plot with Quaritch, which is better than nothing, I guess, but again, you're taking the most compelling aspect of the character and just leaving it on the table. And the stuff with the humans not named Quaritch or Spider doesn't even get that much. Again, there's a lot of new characters who don't really do anything other than explain the plot. Anything human related gets the bare minimum of attention, and that's it. There's a reference to Earth being up shit creek, but they never say why. The humans want to colonize Pandora now, which makes no sense. Why are you colonizing a planet where you can't even breathe the air? And of course, they don't elaborate on this either. There's a lot of dumb stuff like that. But the dumbest thing of all, the thing that made me shake my head and just say F that and F you, is the new MacGuffin. The new thing that pays for the whole party. Cameron might have realized at some point that the whole unobtainium thing was kind of stupid, because unobtainium is not a thing in this movie at all. It never even comes up. And that's really damn awkward, since it was the whole reason why the humans were on Pandora in the first place last time. And I wish they hadn't changed that, because the new MacGuffin, if you can believe it, is even stupider. Whale juice. Just wait till you hear what that stuff does. Not that it matters, because it's only mentioned one time and then it doesn't factor into anything afterward. You would think that what they're using it for would be a pretty fucking big deal, but it isn't. It's just a real quick reason to explain why the humans are doing all this evil shit to the oceans, and then the movie's just done with it like with the Quaritch thing. And frankly, that's a pretty damn awkward pivot after unobtainium was supposedly so important in the first movie, only to get supplanted in the sequel by fucking whales. whales. Man, Kirk and Spock really had no idea what they had with those things, did they? But the humans aren't the only victims of these underdeveloped concepts. There's a Na'vi character who gets the shaft in that department too, but not for lack of attention. This one is because of bad plotting, so even Cameron's favorites aren't immune to this. Minor spoilers on this one. Sigourney Weaver plays this new Na'vi character, Kiri. Is Weaver playing a teenage character weird? Kind of. Don't think about it too much. But there's this big mystery about Kiri's parentage. No one knows who her father is, and it's heavily implied that Kiri was somehow conceived by the planet. And we don't get any answers about that because it's gonna play out in the sequels, I guess. But Jesus Christ, that's a really batshit idea to tease and then just leave the audience dangling on. And it also raises some really creepy questions about what exactly is happening when the Na'vi use their hair to link up with things that I'm not sure I want the answers to. That's how the Na'vi have sex, apparently, but does that mean they're also having sex with animals and plants and AWA when they link up to that stuff? I don't know. I'm not sure I want to know. And believe me, there was plenty of time in the movie to give us more information about this, but God forbid we take time away from all the pretty fish. And that really bugged me, because here you've got a concept that could potentially be really cool or really f***ing dumb, but we don't know which one it is yet because the movie barely scratches the surface of it when there was absolutely time to do more. Why did this movie need to be 3+ hours? Oh, right. F*** you, I'm James Cameron. How silly of me. This is where it really falls apart. If you were hoping that Cameron took the criticisms about the first film being derivative of a bunch of other things into account and maybe tried to be more original this time, well, he didn't. The Way of Water is even more derivative than the first movie was. If Avatar was like Dances with Wolves meets Ferngully with blue aliens, then Avatar The Way of Water is like Free Willy meets Star Trek 4 with blue aliens. Or maybe just more blue aliens. I don't remember, I haven't watched Star Trek 4 in a while. Also, there were a couple scenes where I could have sworn Cameron thought he was making Titanic and the Abyss all over again. And in a way, I get it. Kind of. When you're trying to fill 3+ hours, and for whatever reason you don't want to fill it with story, or at least not fill it to the brim, you're gonna be reaching pretty hard for other ideas to fill that time. But that still doesn't explain why you needed all that time in the first place. And don't get it twisted. This story does have some pretty stupid things in it, but it's not really a bad story. It's a decent story that's been stretched out so goddamn long it'll feel like a bad story by the end of it. Cameron was definitely patting himself on the back non-stop for all the incredible images he created, but he was so focused on that stuff and writing a never-ending love letter to the ocean that he didn't bother to craft a story that was anything better than basic. And a basic story can still work as long as it's well told and doesn't overstay its welcome, but holy shit, this movie feels like it's never gonna end sometimes. And so much of it is just scenery porn and drawn-out action sequences. You did not need 3 hours and 12 minutes for this! And I know that no studio executive in their right mind is gonna get into a pissing contest with James Cameron, but was there really nobody on the lot who could politely approach him like, "Hey, Mr. Cameron, sir! We just watched your final cut. It was transcendent. I wept like a baby. It's gonna win all the Oscars." But the studio does have 1 or 2 notes. Very small notes, barely worth mentioning really, but as long as I'm here. Now, we all know that the ocean makes you hard as a rock in ways a human woman could only dream of, and Lord knows the studio heads would never think of questioning your genius, oh great one. But in the second act, instead of an hour of people looking at fish, what if it was half an hour of people looking at fish? I'll see myself out. You didn't have enough story for this. And that becomes obvious pretty quickly when the plot just starts repeating itself. Big chunks of this thing, especially in the third act, involve characters getting captured and then escaping and then getting recaptured and then escaping again. I swear to God, this happens to the kid characters like 5 times. And outside of that, for most of the movie, you cannot shake the feeling of, haven't we done this already? So many beats or sequences are just stuff they did in the first film all over again. Someone feels like an outsider among the Na'vi, but instead of Jake, it's his kids. There's time spent learning how to ride an animal, but instead of big birds, it's big fish. The humans go to war with the Na'vi over some stupid MacGuffin, but instead of a rock that ends up doing nothing, it's whale goop that ends up doing nothing. It's the same f***ing stuff, just reskinned a little bit, and it's gonna take a lot more than talking f***ing whales to make me forget about this. And on top of everything else, you still have to deal with all the ham-fisted social commentary that Cameron only leaned into more after the first movie, delivering his colonizers are the devil and save the whales message with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the nutsack. It seems pretty clear that telling the most compelling story possible without bringing politics or personal biases into it probably wasn't number one on his list of priorities, as if this wasn't proof enough of that already. Avatar: The Way of Water is both better and worse than the first film. Even with as visually stunning as Part 1 was, Part 2 raises that bar even higher. But at some point it becomes really hard to deny that James Cameron was so in awe of his own technical filmmaking mastery and so focused on doing everything he wanted rather than what the audience might be hoping for or what would make the best story, to the point of the film feeling weirdly self-indulgent that almost everything that can't be glossed over with gorgeous images of pretty fish gets neglected. He introduces new concepts, some of which are bullshit, though there are others that could be fascinating, but most of those are either underdeveloped or are just there to be plot devices and then get thrown out. There are tons of new characters and returning characters, but only a couple of them really make an impression, and that's not helped by a story which wasn't terribly compelling to begin with, that gets stretched way too thin, and for some reason doesn't seem interested in doing anything deeper or more complex with these people, even though with 3 hours and 12 minutes of runtime, there was no reason why it couldn't or shouldn't. Instead of The Way of Water, a better title would have been Treading Water, because that's what I feel like this movie was doing most of the time. It moved some pieces around the board, took a couple pieces off the board, but it didn't really advance the narrative all that much if you think about it. That's why it's so frustrating that they don't do more with the Kiri plot or show us what's going on in Quaritch's head and stuff. There was plenty of room to do that, but instead everything's just moving at a snail's pace. It's an incredible cinematic experience. It's gonna sweep all the technical awards for sure, and it looks so f***ing beautiful it'll bring tears to your eyes, but I wouldn't say the creative side of this movie is any better than average, and even that's probably being generous. There was potential here in a lot of the ideas the movie has, but that potential is largely wasted. The story and characters don't bring enough to the table to justify the runtime, and worst of all, I still don't know what's so f***ing fascinating about water. Maybe that'll be in Part 3. Whenever the hell that comes out. There. That's it. I think that was a very fair and balanced take on Avatar: The Way of Water. Thanks so much for watching, and while you're here, please do all the other YouTube things. Ding the bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. I also have a live streaming channel, links to everything are in the description box, and most importantly, don't forget to thumbs up the video, leave a comment, share, subscribe, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be wiped out by a hostile invasion force of sky people who want to pillage the planet of all its incredibly valuable whale juice is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. So stay tuned, take care, and I'll see you next time.